And welcome to the City of Roswell Mayor and City Council meeting for June 12th, 2023. I am Mayor Kurt Wilson. I'd like to acknowledge my council member and colleagues present. Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Lee Hills, Councilmember William Worthland, Councilman Michael Palermo, and Councilmember Peter Vanstrom. I'll now turn it over to our City Administrator, Mr. Randy Knighton, to explain how the meetings run. Mr. Knighton.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. And in accordance with Section Chapter 3.70 of the City Code, the City Council shall hold regular public meetings. The purpose of City Council meetings are for the public to participate and speak on agenda items which constitute formal decisions by the elected body. Those items are listed on the published agenda, which can be accessed via the city website prior to the meeting. This is a public meeting, and some items do require a formal public hearing. A significant and important component of city council meetings are for mayor and council to hear directly from residents on the items listed on the agenda. Public comments or questions are essential for mayor and council to incorporate as they contemplate each decision. Residents are at the top of our organizational chart, and therefore it is imperative for mayor and council to hear from residents in these meetings. If you would like to speak on an agenda item, we ask that you fill out a comment card, which are located at the back of the room and at the podium. We ask, of course, that everyone observe the principles of mutual respect and display the appropriate demeanor during the course of the meeting this evening, which should be and is reflective of this great community. The mayor is the presiding officer of the meeting and will ensure the orderly exchange of questions, comments, and discussion leading to decision-making by the elected body. We also encourage everyone in attendance and the viewing audience to visit the city website for meetings, events, and informational items. We also encourage you to review and participate in all of the various activities and offerings in the city. There are a number of events scheduled upcoming in the city of Roswell, which the mayor will speak about shortly, which promote community, physical activity, and leisure as we all make Roswell the #1 family community in America. Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. At this time, I'd like to call my friend, business leader in Roswell, former mayoral candidate in 2017, the pastor of the very vibrant Eagle Nest Church, Pastor Lee Jenkins, to the front for our moment of silence and invocation.
Thank you. May we all stand? It's an honor to be here, an honor to do the invocation. I also had the wonderful privilege of meeting First Sergeant Michael DeChaka, and which we will be giving him a proclamation a little bit later today. And I want to personally thank you for honoring and for serving our country. Thank you. Okay. May we all bow our heads in prayer. Almighty God, as we gather in this council chamber, we recognize your sovereignty and we seek your guidance. Grant wisdom to our city leaders that they may govern with integrity, with fairness, and with compassion. Bless our great city, the city of Roswell, with prosperity, with safety, and unity. Inspire our leaders to find creative solutions to the challenges and to promote justice and equality. Help us, dear God, to foster a community that transcends differences and uplifts every person. In this meeting tonight, may your grace and humility guide all of the deliberations. Lastly, may we also remember those in our city who are in need, who are marginalized, and the vulnerable. May your compassion flow through us as we work toward their welfare and seek to uplift the downtrodden. May our decisions tonight bring honor to your name, God, and bring benefit to this great city, Roswell. We pray these things in your precious holy name. Amen.
Thank you, Pastor Jenkins. At this time, I'd like to call United States Army First Sergeant Michael D. Shaka to come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Yes, sir.
I pledge allegiance to the flag
To the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
First Sergeant T'Chaka, I'm going to have you stay right there. And I'd like to ask the council to come down with me for the first item on the agenda under the mayor's report, which is the reading of a proclamation for the esteemed veteran of Roswell Award to United States Army E-8 First Sergeant Michael D. Shaka.
So much. Thank you. Everybody's talking like it looks like church.
It is church, for a minute at least, when we get to honor great gentlemen and women who've served our country. Proclamation, Office of the Mayor, E-8 First Sergeant Michael D. Chaka, esteemed veteran. Whereas in 1968, Michael D. Chaka enlisted in the Delayed Entry Program for active duty. In January 1969, Michael reported to Fort Knox, Kentucky for basic training. Subsequently, he was sent to Fort Gordon, Georgia, where he met his bride, Pat, and attended advanced individual training in electronics. After his training at Fort Gordon, his orders sent him to Fort Rucker, Alabama, where his assignment was to work on the flight line performing electronic task for pilot training desk. In April 1970, Michael was deployed to Chu La, Vietnam to perform helicopter radio maintenance. From 1972 to 1975, he was stationed at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, where he worked the flight line as a helicopter avionics repairman. In 1975, he returned to Fort Gordon, Georgia, and became a master avionics instructor. From 1980 to 1983, Michael was stationed at Mission Army Depot in Germany to work on ordnance bombs, which includes missiles, rockets, gun ammunition, and the radar to locate the bombs. In 1988, Michael reported to Korea for 1 year, during which he was stationed at Wonsan, Korea, with the new rank of E-8 Acting Sergeant Major. At the end of 1988, Michael came back to Redstone Arsenal and became First Sergeant of the 6th Student Company and remained in that position until he retired. And whereas Michael's father, Dominic de Chaka, served in the British Army and was captured by the German enemy. He was a prisoner of war in a Polish prisoner of war camp for 3 years, and in 1942 was released when the Allied forces arrived. Michael and his family immigrated to the United States from Scotland, then on to Canada, and settled in Illinois. Following in his father's footsteps to proudly serve their respective countries, Michael enlisted and served in the United States Army. He dutifully served the United States Army for 6 years before obtaining his citizenship. Michael became a United States citizen in 1976, our country's 200th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Whereas while in Vietnam as an avionics mechanic, Michael volunteered to be a door gunner to relieve the current squad. Michael performed this detail twice, and after the second time upon leaving the helicopter, he saw there were bullets in the chair in which he was sitting. In another instance in Vietnam, a Cobra helicopter went down in the field and was out of commission. The infantry picked Michael up from across a field in another helicopter and brought him to the Cobra to work on getting it started. Michael's initial attempts to repair the helicopter were not successful, so it was decided to destroy and detonate the Cobra so it did not fall into enemy hands. Michael continued to work on the Cobra, and with a lot of skill and a little luck, he got it up and running. The Cobra squad jumped into the helicopter and immediately departed. Michael remained in the field and ran back to his helicopter, all the while being shot at by the enemy. And whereas in January 1990, Michael DiCiacca, First Sergeant, retired from service, and the United States Army honorably bestowed the following medals: the Vietnam Service Medal, the Vietnam Campaign Medal, the Meritorious Service Medal, Third Oak Leaf Cluster, Army Achievement Medal, Second Oak Leaf Cluster, Aircraft Crewman Badge, Army Commendation Medal, Fourth Oak Leaf Cluster, Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Cross Unit Citation with V device, Army Service Ribbon, Overseas Service Ribbon, National Defense Service Medal, Non-Commissioned Officer Professional Development Ribbon, Good Conduct Medal, Sixth Award, and Expert Badge. Now, therefore, I, Kurt M. Wilson, Mayor of the City of Roswell, do hereby name First Sergeant Michael DiCiacca, an esteemed veteran of Roswell, and call upon all our citizens to recognize his outstanding service to our country and our community, and that there is no higher calling than those who serve the United States Armed Forces.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very cool. I don't know what I'm going to talk about now. What do you want? You mind if I sit?
No, please sit. Yes, sit.
Oh, wait.
It's already gone.
Sorry about that. Hold on, Carl. You can sit. There you go.
Thank you. I can't sit too long. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Please sit. You're not going to stand and listen to me yapper. I'm very honored by this. I don't know what I'm going to say now because he took my speech. I was here 3 weeks ago, for the Remembrance Day, Memorial Day. By the way, that's my wife. She's going to keep me straight as we go. That's Pat. We've been married 52 years. Yeah. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. So, as you know, I was born in Scotland, and I wasn't very patriotic at that time because I didn't know any better. I was only 10 years old when we moved to Canada, and then when we moved to the States, I was 14, and I moved to a high school, a special high school called Mooseheart, Illinois. Any Moose members in here? Oh, unbelievable. Anyways, they took care of me. And my father was killed in a cave-in in the coal mines. And because he was a Moose member, they brought him and the rest of my family and my mother to take care of us after he died. So we were immigrated to Mooseheart. Learned a lot of things there. One of the things I learned was how to be a soldier. You wouldn't believe that, but I was a member of the NC, National Defense Cadet Corps. And I did that for 5 years. So it kind of got me ready when I joined the military. I was a little bit more advanced than the normal guy signing up. I went to Fort Knox for Kentucky, that is for sure. Terrible place for basic training in the wintertime. And when I was done there, they sent me to Fort Gordon, Georgia. Now this is where the story really begins. In those days, you had to travel with greens, right? You couldn't travel in civilian clothes. You had to wear the greens. So I traveled in there a day early because I wanted to see what Augusta, Georgia looked like before I signed in on post. Well, it didn't work very well because it was Masters weekend and it was absolutely filled, no hotel rooms. I didn't know what I was going to do. There I was carrying my duffel bag. So I walked into a place called the USO. I trust everybody knows about the USO. And I walked in there, and there was this little blonde 17-year-old girl standing at the counter. And she says, "Can I help you, soldier?" Well, I explained to her I didn't have a room for the night, so if I'd leave my bag there, she'd get me something. If I would just go inside and dance for a little bit with all the other girls. So I did that. While I was dancing, this little 17-year-old came out and said, "You got the wrong partner. Here, you dance with my partner, and I'll dance with him." That was Pat. And we cha-cha'd ourselves to 52 years of marriage. Yeah, pretty good, pretty neat. However, she was 17. I was 19. When I got ready to go to Fort Rucker, she wanted to go with me. I said, "You can't go with me. You're 17. "Well, what will you do if I meet you there?" "I don't know. Just don't come," you know. So I went to Fort Rucker by myself, of course. And when I got my orders to go to Vietnam, she wrote me a letter. And she continued to write me a letter every day after that for a year. Interesting to get letters like that. I had 6 pen pals, but Pat was the best one. A lot of fun in her letters. She used to send me letters where she wrote it in a square. She sent me letters where she wrote them in a circle. Sent letters where she wrote them backwards. She sent letters to me on toilet paper where I'd sit and roll it to read it. But every day I got a letter. While I was in Vietnam, I had a couple of stories I wanted to tell you, if there's enough time. Okay. Well, I won't tell the story then, because actually, the mayor said it already. He explained the me getting shot at and so forth. Okay, but I didn't like Vietnam, so I decided to leave there. I came back 7 days after getting back from Vietnam. We got married, and yeah, pretty good. And that's us. So now my whole military career was done with Pat and 2 children that she gave me. We got one in our first one was in Fort Benning, Georgia, and the second one was in Hawaii. And I was telling the mayor, it took us a long time to convince my son that he was not Hawaiian. He wanted it to be Hawaiian. His birthday was 10th of November, thank you, prompting me. What happens to be the Marine Corps birthday. So every time that we get invited to a Marine Corps birthday, my son thought it was for him. Well, came back from Hawaii, and we came to Augusta, Georgia. Now, maybe you don't know much about the military, but when you're married, you get an assignment every 3 years. So for 21 years, we moved, every 3 years, we moved to a different country, a different assignment. But in Hawaii, when I got back to Augusta, 2 important things happened to me. Number one, the Army made me an instructor. I didn't want to be an instructor. I was scared to talk in public. I just couldn't do it. But in Augusta, you're either a student or an instructor. So they sent me to instructor school. And I went in there and they said, "Welcome to instructor school." No, I'm not doing that. Yes, you are. This is the Army. You're going to be an instructor. So they said, "But we got a deal for you. This school is 2 weeks long. Now, if you can do a good job on your first week presentation, you don't have to come back for the second one. You get a pass." Sound good to me. I studied hard, and I gave a great presentation at the end of my first week. And the 3 judges at the back said to me, "That was perfect. You don't have to come back next week." And I thought, this is what I want. I don't want to be an instructor. And they said, by the way, on Monday morning, you're assigned to Bryant Hall for your first instruction assignment. Holy smokes. I'm in where where I didn't want to go. Well, that lasted me for the next 20 some years of being in the Army. And when I got out, I went back to school, got my master's degree in education, and I was an instructor for the next 23 years for Philips Electronics. So they set me up for my whole life's work, going to school with something I didn't want to do. So that was Augusta. So we traveled all over the world, Hawaii, Germany. I went to Korea for a year, where Pat stayed at home and watched the kids. So it was an easy transition because once I was certified as an instructor, I had it made. Well, as it got next to my career, the end of my career, I got selected to go to a very special school called the Sergeant Major Academy, and where I got my Sergeant Major ring. While I was there, Sergeant Major of the Army came down to meet us. That's a big deal, Sergeant Major of the Army. And he came to a dinner. We had a big dinner, probably 200 Sergeant Majors in the room. And he was sitting there having supper with us. And after supper, a lieutenant came in. And he came in and he started to sing a song. I heard it 2 weeks ago at Memorial Day. Same thing happened. I'm glad to be an American. Well, I was real proud at that time. Oh, did I mention I got my citizenship? Did I forget to say that? There was two things that forced Augusta. I became an instructor and I got my citizenship. That was a big deal because I was in Vietnam 6 years before I became a citizen. Some people said that you can't do that, but I did it. Anyways, at the Sergeant Major's meeting, this lieutenant came in and started singing this song. I'd never heard it before. Unbelievable, very patriotic. And we got to the point of the first chorus. And the first chorus said, stand up. Well, the Sergeant Major threw his chair across the room and stand up. And he said, stand up. And everybody in the room stood up. And they finished the song. Well, unfortunately, I can't sing. I don't know how to sing. But I can say the words. The chorus starts with, I will gladly stand up next to you and defend this land today. I would do that today, right now, for you guys. Not just because I'm American, but because I'm an American soldier. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's take a picture.
Sit or stand for the photo? He's going to stand, because I'm going to be on this side of it. Good, perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, First Sergeant Michael DeTarco. Thank you.
Love it. Yeah.
What a wonderful story. Thank you for sharing it.
Thank you.
I said I
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. I forgot to put this in the picture. This is your phone.
Thank you.
Okay.
We appreciate it. Yes, it's a big deal
That was my speech.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
But you did good.
Thank you so much.
You ad-libbed pretty good.
Thank you. She wants to hear the speech tonight, right before bed, while you're singing.
Thank you so much.
For coming. Thank you. Thank
Okay,
you.
where we're going?
We're going right back over here to get our stuff so we can walk out the door, so that they can do their meeting.
I guess while the Chakas are leaving, I just want to honor them and all of our Roswell veterans and let everybody know, this is not on your agenda. I don't think you'll see it. But it's just to make you aware about a City of Roswell Veterans Tax Benefit. And it's applicable there. You can probably see it. I'll read it to you. It's Roswell resident and own your own home as a primary residence on January 1st of the tax year. If you're a Roswell veteran and have received 100% disability status from Veterans Affairs, you can apply for a disabled veteran exemption. Please visit Roswell's website, homestead exemption for 100% disabled veterans. Applications are accepted between January 1st and June 1st of each year. Once approved, the homestead exemption will renew automatically each year as long as you own and occupy your home. Please attach proof that you're a 100% disabled veteran, and you can contact Veterans Affairs. You can probably see the website. We will publish this for the next 6 months. When it's done, you'll bring your application to City Hall or email to fsd@roswellgov.com. If you need a notary public, please come to City Hall and ask for Robin Kenner, who is the mayor's executive assistant, and she recruited First Sergeant Michael Duchakov, actually found him in a Waffle House. Great story. And if you have any questions or in regards to the Roswell Homestead Exemption, Disabled Veteran Benefit, please contact the Finance Department, Financial Services Division, 770-641-3759, or fsd@roswellgov.com. And we will be talking about this several times over the next 6 months to make sure that we get all of our disabled Roswell vets into that program. The next item on the mayor's report is upcoming events in the city. I'm going to ask my colleague, Councilmember Lee Hills, to go over those.
Great, thank you, Mayor Wilson. As you know, we are full tilt into summer now, which is very exciting, and we haven't hit 98 yet, so enjoy while it lasts. First of all, I want to remind you that this week is Alive in Roswell. That's this Thursday from 5 to 9. Of course, you are welcome to stay and sip and visit and see and enjoy the music, and new friends, old friends, and maybe some friends you'd like to go to a different place, I don't know, and visit. So we got all kinds of things going on Canton Street. Hope you all will join us there. More information at www.aliveinroswell.com. Following that, on Saturday, June 17th, you can visit any of our historic homes, house museums, which are Barrington Hall, Bullock Hall, Smith Plantation, for tours about Black experiences in Roswell, dating back to the city's founding. You can learn about the lives and families who built historic Roswell and how we got to where we are in 2023. So hope you will come out and see some of our historic sites on the 17th. Then we have on Saturday, June 24th, open hearth cooking at Smith Plantation right next door. If you haven't done this, you've missed the boat. You've got to go see Miss Clarissa Clifton. She's amazing. She gives samples. She's got great stories, and she knows how to work the cast iron over a wood-burning fire. I got to tell you, I've done this many times over the years. I've lived here nearly 23 years, and it is never old. So even if you've been, go back. That's Saturday, June 24th, between 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. We've also got a couple of other recipe authors from the area and otherwise from Black female cooks, including Abigail Fisher, Flora Mae Hunter, and Mashama Bailey. So just hope you would check that out at some point, but definitely June 24th between 10 and 3. Finally, would like to point you in the direction of the Sunday, the 25th of June, the Century City Tour. And this is where you can take a fantastic bike ride with a whole group of folks, riders. You will embark on a memorable ride of 25, 35, 63, or 100 miles. If you were in the mayor's ride, you're all primed up and ready to go. So, Mayor, maybe we'll see you out on the... Okay, well, anyway, he will be waving you through. And this is throughout the best roads in North Georgia, filled with horse farms and small country roads. Plenty of rest stops and great entertainment at the end. A meal is provided and live music happens at the end. You can find more information at www.ga400century.com. That's GA400CENTURY.com. So hopefully we'll see you out and about in Roswell during the month of June, and we look forward to entertaining you throughout the city. And I believe my colleague, Councilmember Hall, has something to add.
Councilmember Hill, since the 4th of July is just 4 days after the end of June, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
I can talk a little bit, and we hope that you will join us on a fantastic entertainment and fireworks show on the 4th of July. That's a Tuesday. So if you haven't already called in sick for Monday or Wednesday, do that now. But we hope you'll join us. It's great in our Roswell area park. Christine and I danced in the rain last year, so we hope we got that out of the way and it'll be all sunshine. So put that on your calendars. We'd love to see you. Councilmember Palermo.
And I would add that clarification, too, that you did mention correctly, because I did have a few neighbors ask. In Roswell, we do celebrate July 4th on July 4th, so that is what day to expect it. I did actually have some neighbors asking that question.
That's a great point. Michael, can you attest that we will have fireworks this year?
I am looking forward to fireworks on July 4th and hopefully being a little more dry than in recent celebrations.
Is that a guarantee from you and Jeff Leatherman? I'm going to book it. Okay. Lee, Christine, Michael, thanks so much. And that's it for the upcoming events. Lee, anything else?
That's it for now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks,
Thank you.
Christine. Thank you, Michael. Well, the final item on the mayor's report this evening is the approval of the FY 2024 budget for the city of Roswell, Georgia, in the amount of $194,275,364. This is the second reading. City Attorney David Davidson, would you please read the ordinance, sir?
Thank you, Mayor. This is an ordinance adopting a budget for the fiscal year 2024 for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to Article 6, Chapter 6 of the Charter of the City, beginning July 1st, 2023 and ending June 30th, 2024, appropriating the amount shown in each budget as expenditures, adopting the item of anticipated funding sources, prohibiting expenditures to exceed appropriations, and prohibiting expenditures from exceeding actual funding sources, and amending the Code of Ordinance to effectuate such adoption. Now, therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority, do hereby adopt the following ordinance. The City of Roswell hereby adopts an expenditure budget for fiscal year 2024, said budget being described below and shown in Attachment A for each fund of the City of Roswell, Georgia, totaling $194,275,364. Any increase or decrease in appropriations or revenue of any fund or for any department, the establishment of new capital projects or the establishment of new grant projects, other than those exceptions provided for herein, shall require approval of mayor and city council. A millage rate of 4.463 mills is estimated as part of the proposed budget. The millage rate has a component of 4.363 mills for the general fund operating and capital improvements budget and a component of 0.100 mills for servicing bonded indebtedness. The millage rate shall be adopted by mayor and council at a later date, but prior to issuance of tax bills for the year 2023. This budget fixes the number of budgeted full-time positions in the city at 714. The city administrator or his or her designee is authorized to redistribute funds reserved for merit-based pay increase and operating contingency included in the FY 2024 budget to the various departments as necessary. Mayor and council adopt a capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2024 through 2028 as attached here to and incorporated herein as attachment B. This plan does not indicate any promise of appropriations for future years or unfunded projects. This plan may only be modified through action of the mayor and city council. Mayor and council further approve the reappropriation into FY 2024 of FY 2023 unspent funding in the general fund in order to establish a general fund fuel and utility contingency in an amount not to exceed $250,000. Mayor and council further approve the reappropriation into FY 2024 of FY 2023 unspent funding in the general fund in order to establish a general fund grant match contingency in an amount not to exceed $100,000. Mayor and council further approve the reappropriation of all approved capital projects, grant revenue, grant funding, as well as capital project fund contingency funding that is unspent or uncollected and available as of June 30th, 2023, as shown in attachment B. Mayor and council further approve the reappropriation into FY 2024 of FY 2023 unspent funding for employee wellness program. the fiscal year 2023 unspent funding for the city's education assistance program, FY 2023 unspent funding for Roswell University, FY 2023 unspent funding for the police school zone safety project, FY 2023 unspent funding for legal services, and FY 2023 unspent funding for the election. Mayor and council further approve the reappropriation into fiscal year 2024 of unspent 2023 approved funding in the confiscated assets fund. City administrator and his or her designee may promulgate all necessary internal rules, regulations, and policies to ensure this budget ordinance is followed. And never approve this as a second reading.
Thank you, Mr. Davidson. I think at this time, our city administrator, Mr. Randy Knighton, along with our finance director, Ryan Luckett, will be doing a presentation of the second reading of the budget. Mr. Knighton, the floor is yours, sir.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just provide some opening comments. Good evening to everyone, Roswell residents and staff, and everyone here assembled. I want to thank everyone for being here this evening as we discuss the second reading of the proposed 2024 budget. I certainly want to thank Ryan Luckett, Lynn Williams, the entire finance team for the very fine work they have done on the proposed 2024 budget. I also want to thank the entire leadership team and staff who approach their daily duties with a great deal of professionalism. And just by way of background for everyone, the budget process earnestly began in the fall of last year with a very strong zero-based budget approach. The intent and idea was for all departments to reimagine and rethink their construct of the departments and how we operate in delivering the most efficient services to the citizens of Roswell. There have been literally hundreds of hours spent discussing the intricacies of budget line items, proposed initiatives, programs, and staffing levels. This budget certainly reflects significant elements of this approach and provides the foundation for the coming fiscal year as we effect appropriate change within the organization with the ultimate goal in mind, of course, of exhibiting the highest level of financial and operational stewardship in our service to the residents of Roswell. As I mentioned earlier in a previous meeting, it is always our desire to be the #1 family community in America, and it certainly is more than a slogan. It is a daily approach in reviewing, investigating, and seeking implementation of process and cultural changes within the organization. Mr. Luckett will present the ingredients of the proposed FY 2024 budget, and those include modifications made since the first reading a few weeks ago. I certainly want to commend this mayor and council for your attention, your deliberation, and scrutiny of this proposed budget. We certainly know from the tangible measures that you have taken over the course of the past year that your aim is to advance the city forward and excel in every facet of service delivery and municipal governance. So thank you. As I mentioned previously, whenever those of us who are endowed with public trust are called upon to construct a fiscal year budget, it should not be routine, it should not be simple, and it should not be easy. And this budget process was not. It was arduous, it was laborious, and at times very demanding. However, that is the charge and responsibility we have as a staff, certainly as elected officials, to work with purpose and intent every day in service to the residents of Roswell. I will now turn it over to Mr. Luckett, who will provide a comprehensive overview of the proposed FY 2024 budget.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. And before Mr. Luckett comes up, I can't speak enough to your leadership over the last 9 months of this budget process. It has been invaluable. Your steady hand and your invaluable insight and experience has served this city well. So thank you, sir, for your leadership.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I will be providing a brief recap of some of the information we've discussed at the last 2 meetings regarding the FY 2024 proposed budget. Some key dates. The budget was presented to everyone on May 11th. We had our first reading of the budget on May 22nd, and today represents the second budget reading and adoption. In the presentation this evening, I'm going to go over some highlights, talk about all funds as a whole, the general fund specifically, provide you some highlights of other funds, and then next steps in the process. So discussing the budget highlights, and again, we've discussed this a few different times, but some highlights of the FY 2024 proposed budget are that the budget is balanced. This begins the implementation of a zero-based budget process initiative. It continues the prioritization of public safety investments, and the budget funds over $30 million for capital investment. In terms of zero-based budgeting, the budget includes several initiatives. That includes enhancing the strategic role of information technology, expanding code enforcement efforts to sustain and enrich the quality of life in Roswell, increased investment in stormwater management, and over $3 million in savings identified and accounted for in the 2024 proposed budget. In regards to public safety, the budget includes year 2 of a 5-year full-time fire department transition plan. 25 full-time positions are included, as well as the addition of a full-time emergency management position. The budget also includes best-in-class compensation for our 911 communication officers, as well as 2 additional full-time positions to expand efforts to combat crimes against children. On the capital side, there's over $21 million included for transportation projects, $5 million for the Historic Parks and Botanical Gardens Division activation and maintenance plan. So getting into a summary of all funds, this slide shows you the source of funds across all of our funds in the city, and you can see that the bulk of our revenues come in the form of sales taxes and charges for service and property taxes. One note on property taxes that we've discussed previously. So our proposed budget does include property tax revenues that are based upon the current millage rate of 4.463. But there's flexibility within the proposed budget for the mayor and council to adopt a lower millage rate once more details are known about the digest when we receive that here in a few weeks. Some other notes on other revenue assumptions in the proposed budget. There is a proposed rate increase in stormwater fees for FY 2024. For most customers that fall in the Tier 2 category, that would be an increase from $4.95 to $5.45. And in just a few moments, you'll see later on in the agenda, we do have a resolution for your consideration to implement these proposed rate increases that we have discussed a few different times. But this rate increase in the stormwater fund would go to enhance stormwater management capabilities for the city. In the water fund, the city completed a rate study during FY 2023, found that our current rate structure is susceptible to volatility, and that we needed to address some of our fixed revenues to help address that volatility. So the recommendation for FY 2024 is that volumetric rates remain unchanged, but that we do adjust our base rates to help limit that future volatility. That equates to about a $3 per month increase for most residents, and that helps meet the future capital needs of the system while also maintaining adequate reserves. On the solid waste side, we are recommending an increase in residential and commercial rates. For the standard residential service, that would be an increase of $2.46 per month. That's primarily being driven by inflationary cost increases, including our yard waste and recycling contract, fuel, and the cost of replacing our refuse collection trucks. On the use of fund side, or the expenditure side across all funds, that comes to a total of $194.3 million. That total represents an increase of about 14% or $24 million over the previous fiscal year's approved budget. I did want to point that out because it can be a little misleading. It is a $24 million increase, but the primary reason for that was because when the budget was adopted in the prior year, there were no T-SPLOST 2 expenditures included in the approved budget for FY 2023. Those were added later on in the fiscal year at the mid-year budget. And so now this budget includes a full year's funding of T-SPLOST 2, which accounts for about $18 million of that $24 million increase. In addition, we are also recommending the creation of an IT internal services fund. And because of the way that we have to account for those internal service funds within our budget, those funds are included there. That was an addition of about $6 million. It was a net zero addition to the city, but it represented that increase when you look at all funds as a whole. In terms of full-time positions, the 24 proposed budget includes 714 full-time position recommendations. That includes, you can see 27 in FY 2024 related to public safety. And you can see that growth over the last year or so is primarily due to those increases in the public safety related to the full-time fire department. Moving on to the general fund. Our total source of funds in the general fund is $100.5 million. About a third of that is our sales taxes, about a third is property tax, and about 22% of that is our business taxes. On the expenditure side within our general fund, so this is our primary operating fund and includes the fund that pays for basic city services like police, fire, recreation and parks, and transportation. You can see that our police our department makes up about 30% of the general fund, recreation and parks about 17%, fire at 15%, and administration at about 12%. When you look at that by type, you can see that salaries and benefits comprise about 64% of the total general fund, as well as operating makes up about 19%. Overall, this table gives you a summary of the budget as proposed to you all back on May 11th. This includes a general fund beginning fund balance of $27.4 million, proposed revenues of $98.9, a proposed operating budget of $97.1, and proposed capital expenditures of $3.3 million, giving you a total proposed general fund budget of $100.5 million. We are setting aside 25% as a emergency reserve in our general fund, so that's about 23.4, and that leaves about 2.4 million, which goes back to what we discussed
Ryan, I
earlier.
apologize. There's only really one speaker in the room right now. So I would ask the audience to please pay attention to the one speaker in the room, and just out of courtesy, please. Thank you.
So the 2.4 million remaining goes back to what we discussed earlier about the flexibility within the budget to adopt a lower millage rate when that decision is made here in the next month or so. Moving on to other funds, our water and sewer fund includes a source of funds of 5.4 million and a proposed use of funds of 5 million. Our stormwater fund includes $4.5 million for a source of funds and using about 4.5 million as well. In solid waste, source of funds of 14.3 million and a use of funds of 14.3. Our hotel motel fund includes $1.8 million as source of funds and allocating about 1.7 million of those. In our impact fee fund, we have 3 proposed projects. One, they're all bridge replacements design. And so 500,000 each for Oxbow Road bridge replacement, as well as Charles Place bridge replacement. Again, both design efforts for those bridges. And a total of $500,000 for the Jones Bridge replacement as well. $200,000 coming out of impact fees, and the remaining $300,000 is included in the general fund. The last item here is our American Rescue Plan Act fund. And through this funding, we are recommending $5 million to go towards the Historic Parks and Botanical Gardens Division activation and maintenance plan. Moving on to our budget ordinance, just some highlights we wanted to point out to everyone. So the budget ordinance itself sets the allocation by fund and department and establishes guidelines for budget modifications. It authorizes the number of full-time positions for the city. It authorizes the redistribution of merit pay and contingency funds. It establishes contingencies for fuel and utilities as well as a grant match contingency. The budget also authorizes the reappropriation of expenditures that are unspent and available at the end as of June 30th of 2023 for capital projects, grant projects, confiscated asset funding, employee wellness, education assistance, Roswell University, the police school zone safety program, external legal services, as well as the municipal election. The next section gets into some add and delete proposals. These are based on feedback that we received as of today. So this is a summary of the general fund. We went over this earlier. This is what was presented as of May 11th, 2023. So getting into a high-level look at what the proposed add and delete proposals do. So the proposals include an increase $400,000 of proposed operating additions, $800,000 reduction or $800,000 in deletions in the operating budget. So that would be a net operating budget decrease in the general fund of $400,000. On the capital side, there are suggestions of $1.2 million in additions for a net increase in the capital budget of $1.2 million, which would revise our remaining fund balance down to $1.6 million. So to get into some of those details, the first one here is to establish an economic development contingency. So this would be placing funds within our economic development division for future use by mayor and council. And I just want to point out that as a contingency funding, these funds are still subject to the requirements of the city's procurement rules and regulations. So for professional services, for instance, anything over $25,000 must be formally procured, go through a formal process, and would require mayor and council approval. Anything between $2,500 and $25,000 would require 3 formal quotes for that process. So this would be $400,000 allocated for an economic development contingency. This is in the operating budget. On the operating side as well, 2 proposed deletions. This would be decreasing the professional services line item in the administration department by $400,000, as well as reducing the contingency account in the mayor's budget by $400,000 for a total reduction in the general fund operating budget of $800,000. On the capital side, we've received recommendations for establishing funding for a future capital asset replacement fund. So this is something that our staff internally will be working on and be bringing recommendations to the mayor and council during FY 2024 in preparation for the FY 2025 proposed budget to establish a capital asset replacement fund. And this is basically setting aside money to get a head start on funding those efforts so that we have funding available to fund the future replacement of our major capital assets. The budget also includes increasing funding for citywide facility maintenance by $400,000. So it's total increase in the capital budget by $1.2 million. So this gives you a summary of the general fund, including these proposed changes. So here you can see the proposed operating expenditures have decreased by $400,000 down to $96.7 million. The proposed capital expenditures have increased by $1.2 million up to $4.5 million. And the total general fund proposed budget, if all of these items were approved tonight, would increase by $800,000 to $101.3 million, and would leave a remaining fund balance of $1.6 million, which would be adequate, as far as we know at this point, to allow the city to adopt the rollback millage rate when the city makes that decision on the millage rate here in the next month or so. So to wrap up, the proposed budget for FY 2024 is available on the city's website, and that will be updated with the adopted budget based on the actions taken tonight by Mayor and Council. And Mayor, I believe that concludes the presentation, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Ryan, outstanding job. Thank you so much. Does council have any questions or comments for Ryan or anyone else on the staff? Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. So again, first off, I think it is important to give credit where credit's due. Staff has done an excellent job with all the time that was put in for this very complex budget. And without a doubt, this mayor and entire city council is very familiar with the budget and spent a lot of time with this for sure and put a lot of work into this. I obviously was the vocal opponent during the first reading where Councilman Vanstrom and I voted against it. And I still am in that same position. I will say that the budget updates that were proposed by Mr. Luckett that are in right here do make it better. These I think are a step in the right direction, and I appreciate that. But that being said, for me, my major issue is that there's just too large of a percentage of this budget going towards operating and not enough going towards capital. And specifically, as I mentioned with my opposition during the first reading, is is I really believe we need to be investing every single year and setting, even if that investment is setting money aside, into our parks, even more so, our sidewalks, and resurfacing. So this has some resurfacing. It has some leftover from a parks standpoint from the previous year, and it does not have the sidewalk money. It would be relying just on from a bond from that standpoint. But for me, I would really need to see us just really putting money into those three things. And I do believe there's the cuts to make. I absolutely would love the opportunity to talk and find compromises and find where those cuts tonight. But at the same time, I do want to give credit where credit's due, that without a doubt, this proposal is better. It is that $1.2 million better of more capital focus and a lower net operating budget. So that I think is a step in the right direction. And what I absolutely have to give this mayor and the city council credit for is last year in 2022, the fact that this mayor and council went back to the rollback rate was absolutely not easy. If it was easy, then previous city councils would have done it, which previous city councils here did not do it. If it was easy, then our neighboring cities would do it. Our neighboring cities did not do it last year or the previous years. I believe, from everything I've seen and heard, I don't believe our neighboring cities are doing it this year either. So I absolutely do give a lot of credit that we're going back to the rollback rate for a second year in a row, and that's really not easy to do. Again, though, what's important for me is to make sure that I feel it's more sustainable for a budget to not be growing the operating and really focus on growing the capital investments.
Thank you, Mike. Council, any other thoughts, comments, or questions? Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Beeson.
I apologize. I've dug through this whole thing and I cannot seem to find it. It might be a question for Jeff Leatherman. It could be a question for Ryan. Can I get a line item breakdown of the $5 million Historic Parks Botanical Gardens Division Activation and Maintenance Plan? I can't find the line item breakdowns. I remember it was covered at the 30,000-foot view in the initiation. Just wanted clarification. Apologies.
No, thank you, Sarah. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. I'll just run through my list. I only brought one copy of it, so then I'll show it up here on the display as well. And so the line item breakdown will go as follows. We have wayfinding and directional signage that is dedicated at $90,000. Holly Hill occupancy, life safety, and site improvements estimated at $1 million. As we transition to Barrington Hall and the park enhancements there, along with our Welcome Center enhancements at $355,000. And then transition over to Mimosa, and the lion's share of the work at Mimosa is site improvements there at $3.1 million. It's on 2 pages. I'll just put it up here real quick. Those are the first page, and I'll switch over to the second page as well.
Could you go back to that first page? There was money allocated for docks, correct?
So we have, let me go back over here. Docks Cafe is projected out in fiscal year 25. We have money in our current fiscal year 23 capital budget that will roll over into 24, already allocated to Docks Cafe for some of the planning efforts going on out there.
Got it. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Sarah. Any more questions, Sarah, or thoughts? Thank you, ma'am. Any more comments or thoughts or questions from council? Thank you very much. At this time, I would invite any Roswell residents that have any comments or questions that would like to speak on the proposed second reading of the budget to come up at this juncture. I would request your time is limited to 5 minutes, and obviously introduce who you are and where you live. If there's anybody that wants to speak on, have any questions or speak on the budget. Welcome. Well, Jason, I'll introduce you, former Oslo mayoral candidate in 2021. Welcome, Jason Yao. How are you, sir?
I'm good. I'm going to speak more generally about the budget rather than, anything specific, because I don't want to be unnecessarily contentious, especially since I appear to be the only citizen speaking tonight. I think transparency is an issue that's been brought up, and there are some facets of the budget that appear to be less than transparent. It's not just specifically budget, but there are other facets of city operations that seem to lack transparency.
So your comments are regarding the budget?
They are.
Okay.
And so what I want to do is give an example from my own experience in dealing with the public. When I was actively developing property, I started the practice of meeting with the public before the zoning signs would go up. And I did this because I realized that once the zoning signs went up, the people were automatically oppositional to whatever it was. And it didn't matter what the merits were. The fact is that they weren't involved in the process leading up to that zoning sign going up, who they saw as being disrespectful. And my point is that it became such a successful strategy that now every governing authority has it as a required element in the zoning process. When I was doing it, it wasn't a requirement. Now it is. So for what you guys are doing, when you have something that ends up being a blind side after the fact because it's not readily apparent in the budget presentation, you run the risk of having a public reaction that is less than positive. And it doesn't matter what the merits are, it's the blind side that the public doesn't appreciate. And so I would like to see you guys take more of a proactive approach with, when you're doing the budget, with the different detailed facets of reaching out to the public and letting them know what you're doing and why you're doing it. There shouldn't be mysteries, and there are in this, because it's the mysteries that drive the public crazy. So
That's a fair point, Jason. Do you want to address you want to ask any questions about any mysteries that are there that we might be able to address?
Well, I think it's on page 24. It's the expansion of the staff for the mayor's office. It's not clear what the purpose of that hire is. It's not clear what the qualifications are going to be for the person that's going to be hired. And I've heard rumors of who it might be, and I think that might cause some people in the public to go, are you kidding? Why didn't you say this up front? Why did you masquerade it with a mystery and announce it after the fact?
It's a fair point. I can tell you that the proposed is, I think, $100,000 for the mayor's budget at this juncture. That's the proposed budget. And once that, if it's approved, if a position is, or a person is put up, or a position is put up, it will have to be voted on by council. So it will be a public process.
And I think it started out as like $1 million kind of fund and was worked down to $100,000. And that's probably the trigger. You got people very suspicious of what the agenda was and how that money was going to be spent.
Well, I will share with you that to the general spirit of your thoughts is that one of the things Councilmember Hall and I were talking about, and Councilmember Hills and I were talking about, is we think we do the unthinkable, and we may make every single budget meeting an open meeting next year so people have an understanding of how in-depth and rigorous and transparent the process is internally, because it's our desire for this government to be fully transparent. And I'm sure, as everybody knows, sometimes when you work through something for 9 months and think you got a solution, there's some people say, hey, let's change it a little bit, and it gets modified, and then, hey, let's change it again, it gets modified, and that happens a lot in any, as you well know, as somebody who's been involved in business all your life, a lot of times that happens in the last minute.
Well, sometimes the trick is to make their eyes glaze over because it's too much information. But too much information is better than not enough and a blind side at the end. So that's my contribution.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the spirit of your comments. Anyone else, any Roswell residents besides Mr. Yao would like to speak on the budget? Being that there are no other Roswell residents, I bring it back to the council for additional thoughts and comments and questions. Councilmember Beeson.
I just wanted to acknowledge Mr. Yao's comments. I hear you in terms of wanting to have better clarity on exactly where the line items are going, especially in some of that lump sum from the top spending. I want to commend the department heads, Mr. Luckett, Len, Christine Hall, who's Mayor Pro Tem as well as our finance liaison, really spent the time trying to trim as much fat as possible throughout the entirety of the budget. Some of my holdout criticisms, even up to the 11th hour today, was that I worried about that top-down approach and also not providing enough clarity about where exactly those funds, the intention of those funds and where they should be going. I think some of these edits come, and I don't believe that I was the only council member who had those hesitations. So I think that some of the edits that came out of that today was providing clarity of not just having lump sum spending, but that this is truly line itemed or allocated for economic development. Or this is a line item that's really for buildings maintenance or operations, or in the event that something catastrophic happens to the building, our AC goes out, whatever it is, we have that line item, and it's not just a lump sum free-for-all from the top down of we can pick and choose where it goes, because really, I had a more crass way of describing it, but it's taking the fat from elsewhere and just piling it onto the top. So I think at this point, though, where we've gotten with some of these removals and where we've gotten with some of these line item allocations, I think that was helpful. Because I'll admit, I was in the same boat that you were. I had some hesitations about where those items would be. But at the end of the day, I think it's our job as mayor and council collectively to pass a budget. Am I 100% behind everything on here? No, there's definitely going to be some trade-offs with other folks that we serve alongside one another about where their priorities are. But I do think at the end of the day, it's our job to pass a budget. It's our job to fund the city. It's our job to make sure that we're functional, we're operational, that our 700 employees, is that what the number was, are able to do their job as well, so that the quality of life here in Roswell is elevated. I think not passing a budget largely would be more of a disservice to the city. But I hope that some of these summary of additions and deletions provide a little bit better clarity about really where that money should be going. Thank you.
Sarah, sorry, I didn't mean to be rude to you. My apologies. No, I turned for a second, so I apologize. I missed the end of the comment. I'm sorry. No, and I think the spirit of Jason's comment is this process is it's our desire to be transparent. And if we're guilty in some sense, manner, or form, and I put myself first and foremost in that guilty position, want to rectify that. We want to, because this is your government. It belongs to you, the people of Roswell. And we want to make sure that there's clarity about everything. And if we fail, or if I fail on that, I want to correct that. So I thank you for the spirit for your suggestion. Councilmember Hall.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councilmember Beeson, for your comments. Transparency is really what we're after when we do the budget, and we did talk about this. We said, you know what, I don't know why this wasn't an open process for the last 9 months, and anybody can, the public and every council member should be participating in this. And this is very, very different from administrations of the past, when simply it was the mayor's budget and it was presented, and that was it. There was really, at least my experience, was not participating in it. So I think we're really onto great path going forward as far as getting the public engaged, opening everybody's eyes to everything, all the good that we're doing. I mean, it's tremendous. This was a huge, I can't say how big this zero-based budgeting approach was, implementing it this year. So, and I thank the mayor for, and the staff and everybody for their participation. I mean, this is really a tremendous accomplishment for the city.
Thanks for your leadership throughout, Christine. And to your point, I'll just give you a little insight. There's a law, which I know everybody's thinks is transparent. I think it's a pain in the butt sometimes. It's a perfect example. I can't have all 6 council members with me in our budget meetings, which ideally, I would like to have all 6 council members in every budget meeting. I can have 2. And because of the continuity and the amount of information, it's almost impossible to move in and out people because there's so much material being covered, irrespective of liaison, because there's been so much going on with this budget. And I have to tell you, so Christine said today, you know what? Why don't we just make the whole thing a public meeting? I said, that's a great idea. Let's do something really radical. In FY25, we're going to make, Brian's going to hate us, and so Lynn. We're just going to make the whole budget process. And I think it'll be illuminating for people to see the seriousness of the people that serve their city on the talent staff side. And I think they'll be really pleased with their elected officials, with their city council people, and see how serious these 6 people address this and are smart and ask really tough questions and are really, really, really accountable to their roles as servant leaders. So I love that idea, Christine, and you've been amazing this past 9 months, so thank you. And Lee, amazing as well, thank you. Peter, I think you wanted to say something.
Well, first and foremost, I'd like to say how impressed I am with the staff, with the council, and with the mayor. This process has been incredible. I mean, the amount of hours that were put into this by Christine Hall on the budget as the liaison, Council Member Hall and Hills, and the mayor, it was unbelievable. And I really do appreciate also the amount of help from the staff. Any question I had, any question that any of us have been immediately answered, immediately taken care of, immediately explained. And that's made this process so simple on all of the council. And so thank you guys so much for that. It's just been a wonderful journey. I never thought I'd say a wonderful journey about a budget in my life, but it's been very easy. I would like to qualify, well, easy compared to what it could have been. But I just want to clarify one quick thing when it comes to the professional services seem to be something we're discussing a lot and that are being discussed by the public. And I think Jason made a referral to that, a reference to that. There's one area where we're looking at hiring. We're looking to bring on a consultant for real estate economic development consultation. And in so doing, we also want to plan ahead, and we want to create a contingency, economic development contingency budget so that we're ready and that we're planning and that we're ready to implement the ideas that are going to come out of the consultations that are going to occur in creating a flow for economic development in this city that's never been done before. I'm excited to be a part of the team that's going to be creating this flow, working with our consultant. And once we have that worked out over what will be an arduous up to 6 to 9 month process, we'll be looking at what do we need to do economically now with finances to move these ideas forward. And that's where those contingency funds sit as we plan for that future instead of trying to react to that future. So I think it's been wonderfully handled, wonderfully done, and I hope that explains a little bit to the public of where we're headed.
Thank you, Peter. Michael, yes, sir. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. I think Councilman Vanstrom definitely did highlight the true amount of work that went into it. I will say I do appreciate and like the sound of these budget, these just more detailed budget meetings next year, where the public can truly see how boring your job and these officials' job is. But I think that's a good thing for everybody to see. I do want to clarify that of course it's state law that a budget must be passed, and without a doubt a budget would always be passed. I think the difference of opinion is basically just how we get there. Obviously, when looking at operating expenses as done, certainly it's really the scalpel approach or the cleaver approach, and I of course prefer to go at the operating expenses with a cleaver. And at the same time, the fact that we're the only city that we know of that's going to the rollback rate, and that previous city councils prior to last year did not do that. Clearly, I think council should feel good about the compromises in getting here. But again, my push is I'd rather spend more time and find more expenses to cut, and taking those cut expenses into just more investments and improvements of added sidewalks, road resurfacing, et cetera.
Thank you, Mike. Any other thoughts or comments? Councilmember Morthland?
We kind of touched on it earlier in the comments about we've been talking about this budget since September or October of last year, but I would really, really like to put the spotlight and give them the honor of being recognized further for Councilmember Halls and Hills for the past at least, I'd say 90 days, have been in every single day some form of budget meeting here at City Hall. And even though the bat signal went out and the call was for anybody that can come, please come, those were the two that were here consistently. And for that level of effort and just gumption to see this through is unparalleled. The two pieces that I'd like to highlight in the budget are the two additions down here, and that is the funding for future capital replacement fund and the citywide facility maintenance piece. One of those is what we had always talked about, deferred maintenance of the $800,000. That number is for year one of us setting aside a savings account for all of our big time capital needs that will be coming down the line. First example of that comes as artificial soccer fields. We only have a 10-year useful life span on those fields. This is year one of us setting that money aside because we know at some point we're going to be replacing that. So that is a huge, huge thing for us to do because we don't want to find ourselves in the same predicament that we were in last year where we had to go and do the bond referendum. Second piece on that is the $400,000 for the facility maintenance piece. That's emergency. That is when the Adult Recreation Center on Grimes Bridge in the middle of Christmas, pipes freeze and flood the entire place. That's what that money is there for. So fantastic job here. Really glad to see this come through.
Thanks, Will. It's funny. There is so much I really want to celebrate and share about this budget. Like I think Sarah said it, like nobody gets exactly what they want, and it really is a work for all of us. There is so much great stuff in this budget to celebrate beyond the process. And so many great things for the city that are coming out of this budget. I have to admit, I'm a little gun shy because I've been, in budget world for the last 2 weeks and last 48 hours. So my mind's a little frozen in terms of being able to celebrate all the great stuff that, Will, you started to say. For example, there's something historical. The city actually has begun the business of beginning capital asset replacement funds. That's what you do responsibly. If you're a homeowner, it's what you do responsibly. You have a business and you have assets, and that's what the city has begun the process. And I will tell you, not enough. Get ready. Watch what comes from us in the future, because we're just starting the process, and this is year one. And thanks to your credit and leadership on that. Been so many things to shine. Kind of Ryan went through them in the bullet points, but there are a lot of things that are really of great consequence. The Historical Assets Fund, beginning the Historical Assets Fund, that's a gigantic deal for this city, and a way of paying for it. So, Lee, you're the only person on the dais who hasn't said anything. You want to say anything?
I sure would. I do want to just add on to what Councilmember Morthland said, just as a point of reference. When the mayor, Morthland, Vanstrom, and I were elected, looking back at the previous year's budget, we collectively as a city, and I'm not necessarily pointing fingers, but we had around a $300,000 plus budget for Parks and Rec for maintenance, and it got whittled down in that year to, I don't know, 60-ish thousand. And we've got 800 set aside here. It was part of the conversation of why one of the many things, why we wanted to go forward with the bonds, to really reclaim our parks and supercharge all of those. So this is all part of a grand plan, not a scheme, as some would have you think. This is a plan. And it's very intentional, and it's hard. I love the idea of having a public budget season next year. I won't even say session, but that's just a point of reference for common people like me. This crew outshines me academically and mathematically every single day. So it's been, I can't even believe I'm going to say this because my husband's going to chew me out. I married that guy, the money guy. So to be involved in this kind of process, dealing with these kind of numbers, and that I understand it, Ryan, Lynn, and all of the folks that are your professionals that you've got in a sweatshop working behind you, I don't understand how that all comes together, and I'm grateful. And but I do get it, and I've been through all these meetings. I didn't miss a one, nor did Councilmember Hall, and for a regular commoner like me to understand it and feel good about this budget is a big deal. It's a big deal to me, and I have to and want to represent you well. So I was the one asking the dummy questions, and everybody was able to explain it in a way that I could understand it. So my gifts are in other areas, but I am talented enough to be able to consume that and digest it in a way that I can serve the citizens, residents, and guests of our city, and I'm proud to do so.
Well, I think when people see the process this year publicly, I think they're going to see how much you add to the equation and to the entire process, Lee. So you're self-deprecating. Sarah, yes, ma'am.
I was going to ask Mr. Luckett if you could provide additional clarity one more time. I realize that upon initial reading and looking at just year-to-date dollars, it looks at first pass like a 14% budget increase, but it's really not because of how it's accounting and how it's showing on our books. Can you provide clarity on that real quick?
Yes. So to just recount what I mentioned earlier, the 14% increase is a little misleading because at the approved budget for FY 2023, ready at that point really to allocate anything for T-Spot.
Ryan, we can't hear you, brother.
So when the budget was adopted for FY 2023, there were no T-SPLOS-2 expenditures included at that point. T-SPLOS-2 had just been approved or just started a few months before that. And so the increase that you're seeing in FY 2024, about 18 million of that is related to fully funding a full year's worth of T-SPLOS-2 revenues. So that's the biggest chunk of that increase. The other piece of that is related to our new IT internal services fund. So as a city, there's not necessarily a net increase in IT expenditures. There's some increases baked in there, but the biggest increase that you're seeing in there is that there are charges going to the departments. We're charging the departments for their IT expenses, and then all those IT expenses come into a different fund where they're governed in one place, managed in one place, and spent out of one place. So it's a little bit of double counting, but that's kind of how we have to show it. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Peter or Will, do you guys want anything else? Christine, anything from you? No, I'm ready to make a motion. Very good. Christine, would you like to make a motion? For the second reading.
Just a point of clarification. Ryan, with the amendments, is the amount still 194, 275, 364, or is that amount different with the amendments?
So it is different.
Can you tell me what that amount is,
yes.
please?
With the changes, the total all funds budget would be 196, 275, 364.
Thank you.
Give me that number again, please, Ryan.
196, 275, 364.
All right, that's straight up 2 million. Quick clarification. Okay, so it's 2 million more. Is that correct? Versus the.
Yes, that is the that's the $800,000 we're allocating for the capital asset replacement, and then the additional 1.2 million that we talked about.
Outstanding. Thank you, sir. The net capital budget increase. Yep.
Because we moved them into capital, it changed it, or if you'd like to address.
Yeah, could you clarify on that? Because it was my understanding that it was for that citywide facility maintenance, we were moving 400 that was already existing in that budget to another area.
So the general fund by itself is being increased by $800,000. And then because it's capital, it's being transferred to our capital projects fund, so it's appearing over there as well.
Got it. So removing from the operatings for the general fund and moving it into the capital asset. Thank you.
Ryan, just say that again for everybody's clarification, because it can be very confusing.
Yes, so general fund operating budget is going down by 400,000. The general fund capital budget is going up by 1.2 million. So overall in the general fund, it's a net increase of $800,000. And then because we're increasing capital, we're transferring those funds over to our capital projects fund, which is where we spend our capital. So overall, in the big picture budget, that accounts for the $2 million increase that you're seeing.
Sarah, is that satisfactory?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Good old accounting.
Peter? Okay. All right, so Christine, you got clarity on that?
Yes, I do. I'm ready to
Outstanding.
make my motion.
Yes, ma'am.
Approval of the fiscal year 2024 budget for the city of Roswell, Georgia, in the amount of $196,275,364, which incorporates the add-delete proposals that were presented today. And this is the second reading.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Do I have a second to the motion?
Second?
Seconded from Councilmember Lee Hills. All those in favor of the approval of the FY 2024 budget of the city for Roswell, Georgia, in the amount of $196,275,364, please raise your hands. All those opposed? The budget passes 5-1. Thank you very much. Congratulations, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. All right, next is the consent agenda. Does council have any questions or comments regarding any items on the consent agenda? Outstanding. Is there anybody, are there any Roswell residents have any items they'd like to speak on, any items on the consent agenda? Yes, sir. On the consent agenda. Welcome back, Mr. Yao. Good to see you, sir. It's been a long time.
Oh, I'm here as Mickey Mouse.
You hear what? Sorry.
I'm here as Mickey Mouse.
No, you're Jason Yao.
Uh-oh, you got me. So what I wanted to speak, since this is on the consent agenda, it's the money for the consultant to do preliminary design work for the Pine Grove corridor. As I happen to live on that corridor, I am very interested in what goes on here. For one thing, I think that is an extraordinary amount of money for a concept plan. I'm happy to do that for half the price. But I was, and I let Jeff know, I was a little disturbed to see that my street was not on the map that is representing the corridor and all the streets that are affected by the corridor. And since I am on a corner of that street on the corridor, I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that we need to address that. The other thing that concerns me in the scope of that corridor is that it ends at Mimosa. And the problem in that corridor is what happens between Mimosa and the intersection of Highway 9 and Canton Street, because that backs the traffic up in the morning, sometimes as much as a mile on Pine Grove Road. And if we don't fix that last stretch, and that's really the valve in the pipe, we're not going to be able to fix what happens in the pipe. So I'd like to see that last stretch and it's Magnolia at that point from Mimosa to the intersection of Canton Street and Highway 9. I'd like to see that included in the scope of that phase of Pine Grove Road. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Mr. Yao. Thank you. Any other comments, thoughts, or considerations or questions from any Roswell residents on the consent agenda? Being that there are none, I bring it back to council for any additional thoughts, comments, or questions on the consent agenda. If there are not, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion to approve.
Motion approved from Councilmember Hills. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Mortland. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Consent agenda passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Next is the Finance Department. Councilmember Hall, would you read the administration item, please?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, approval of a resolution adjusting stormwater utility rates, sanitation rates, and water utility rates, and this will be presented by Director Luckett.
Thank you, Christine. Welcome back, Ryan Lynn.
This should be quick. This is basically information we've discussed already this evening. Our budget that you all just approved is based on these rate increases. As I mentioned before, they affect stormwater, solid waste, and water. So for stormwater fees, as I mentioned, for Tier 2 customers, it's an across-the-board increase, but just to give you an example of where most customers fall, that would be Tier 2, would be an increase from $4.95 to $5.45 per month. It would be an increase in revenue to the Stormwater Fund of $395,000, and that goes to pay for the positions that were approved in the budget. On the solid waste side, most of our residents pay the standard residential service. This represents an increase of $2.46 per month. There's also commercial increases included as well. Again, driven by inflation related to yard waste and recycling, fuel, and refuse collection truck costs. And then for our water fees, we're recommending an increase on the base fee to help address volatility, revenue volatility within the water and sewer fund. So it equates to about a $3 per month increase for residential customers on the base fee, but no change in volumetric increases. The resolution does include future rate adjustments of 6 to 7%, and it's outlined in the resolution through FY 2029. So our recommendation is approval, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Luckett. Any council, any comments or questions for Mr. Luckett? Being there are no comments or questions from council, I take it to Roswell residents. Any Roswell residents would like to address this matter, ask any comments or questions, or make any statements? Being there are no Roswell residents would like to comment on the matter, I bring it back to council for any additional thoughts, questions, or comments. Being that there are none, Councilmember Hall, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor. Motion to approve item number 1, approval of a resolution adjusting stormwater utility rates, sanitation rates, and water utility rates.
Thank you, Councilmember Hall. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Lee Hills. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ryan. Next is the Administration and Governance Department. Councilmember Hills, would you read the administration item, please?
Yes, Mayor Wilson. This is consideration to approve a text amendment to amend Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2.5, Code of Ethics, Section 2.5.3, Prohibitions of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell regarding appointments and nominations to boards and commissions. This is the second reading.
Thank you, Lee. Mr. Davidson, would you please read the ordinance, please, sir?
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2.5, Code of Ethics, Section 2.5.3, Prohibitions of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Roswell regarding campaign contribution and for other purposes. Now therefore, the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell, pursuant to their authority to hereby adopt the following amendment, text of which is included herein by reference, especially the red part are the changes, and if approved, this will be the second reading.
Thank you, David. Does council have any questions or comments on this matter? Councilmember Beeson.
Thanks. Just wanted to reiterate, as this is the second reading, wanted to bring forth this language just as to not beg any questions as if there's any impropriety or if there is any conflicts of interest with members who are appointed to our boards and commissions. The one namely that I had the largest concern with is our Board of Ethics. It's my understanding, speaking to former council members who served on Roswell City Council for many years, when I had a question when I was appointing my board member for Board of Ethics, each council member gets 2, and I was considering who I would want to appoint based off those who had applied through me. I had asked a former council member, like, hey, like, what should I consider? They said, I'm going to be honest with you, in the years that I was on council, the Board of Ethics was never convened. But then when you go back and you look at years and years of the Board of Ethics, well, no duh. A lot of times you can see who donated to who, or who has some sort of personal interest with those who are on council or those who are elected. And so I wanted to try to decrease that or make our Board of Ethics more ethical. I still think that that could apply to all of our boards and commissions, is to not create an echo chamber or a rubber stamp, but really have somebody who is representing all of Roswell and not just some sort of special interest, which is why I had suggested through legal the creation of the language of the appointment or reappointment of a member of any board or commission where a council member knowingly accepted a campaign contribution in their last election to the potential appointee and their immediate family, and that mayor and council should not nominate or appoint those and would therefore recuse themselves if another council member wanted to make that nomination. I do have some concerns with the addition of language in subsection L, which I believe was Councilmember Palermo had added. The vote to approve the appointment or reappointment of a member to any board or commission where that council member knows or has reason to believe that the member in question could receive a pecuniary benefit from decisions made by said board or commission. The reason why I hesitate with that language, it's, in my opinion, partially redundant. We already have within our code of ordinances the requirement for anybody who's on a board or commission to recuse themselves when they have any potential pecuniary benefit or financial benefit. They are required to recuse themselves. If they do not, that could be taken to court and they would be held liable for that decision. Additionally, to me, this language is highly unenforceable. The two subsections that I had added, subsection K and subsection B, really beg the question of us as a council member knowing who did I get money from and removing myself from this conversation. In subsection L, it instead requires me to be Nostradamus and wax poetic about what I think somebody could make money from or how I think they could get an interest out of something. And to me, it makes me question as to whether we as council and mayor could be held liable in the event that maybe they do later on down the road find financial benefit. Was I supposed to know that somehow? And if not, how that language would be enforceable. But with that, I turn over to the rest of mayor and council to decide what to do.
Thank you, Sarah. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. I am definitely very happy to see this at the second reading tonight, especially at committee. It almost failed out of committee, so I was really glad that it passed 4-3 out of committee. And really the key is for what we've actually seen actually happening in the city, because as mentioned, going back decades, none of us have ever heard of or seen, or frankly, it's never happened of having the ethics board, for example, ever meet. Whereas in what we absolutely did do is, and prior to any of us were on council, for example, but there's multiple examples over the years where there's been a member appointed to a commission or a committee or whatnot, where they're in a business that profits off the decisions, not when it's their individual rezoning or individual variance, et cetera, but decisions being made that affect the whole city. And a big example is the UDC. So with the UDC, and there's other examples as well, but for the UDC commission, having an individual that was a developer that was going to develop in the city of Roswell and completely based off of the decisions made, that's a lot of what led to the UDC increasing the density and really changing the different aspects of the character of the city. And frankly, I feel the onus does need to be on this mayor and council, that we should not be knowingly putting somebody on a committee or a commission knowing that the business they're in, they're going to be profiting off the decisions that are being made. The individuals we're appointing really should be having a resident's perspective and a resident's point of view, not the point of view of how they can profit off it. So I definitely look forward to this hopefully being passed tonight, and certainly think it's really important that we're taking away the profitability of a committee or commission, which is something that we've actually seen happening over the years.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Sarah.
Just a point of contention with that. In committee, it wasn't that it was a 4-3 vote against the entire language. The vote was because a motion was made on my initial motion, which was to include line item section B and line item K and excluded line item L for the reasons that I just outlined, because to me it's poor policy if it's unenforceable. If we are your elected officials, it is our job to not only pass policy, but to pass enforceable policy. In the last reading of this, Councilmember Palermo, you said that no policy is perfect. I beg to differ. I think it's our goal to try to get as close to perfect as possible, which is why we voted against your motion on the amendment to change the language, because it makes it, in my opinion, weaker. I therefore cannot support something that includes line item L, because to me it is bad policy if it is unenforceable, and it's therefore not good for the city.
Yes, sir. Councilmember Banstrom.
Yeah, as far as line item L goes, in further review and looking at it, I've got great examples in the development authorities where we have had responsible businessmen who were working through master planning sessions, both in the Roswell Development Authority and the Downtown Development Authority. And I see, quite frankly, no reason how we could avoid having some businessmen and women who might be put in a position to be financially profitable in some of the things that are planned and go on in the city. And they very responsibly recused themselves every single time that there was any possibility that they were going to be looking like they may be profiting from anything that was being discussed that overlapped or included in any possible way their business. So I think the system that we have works very, very well, and I do think that you are creating some boards and you're creating some commissions where you just are going to have people who potentially could rig the system and maybe make a little money on it now and then. But we have responsibility as the liaisons and as the council to police that. And we also have the responsibility, we also have volunteers who respect that. And they join those committees fully aware that they will need to recuse themselves in certain instances. And from what I've seen, they've done that very responsibly.
Thank you, Peter. Yes, Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. So first off, for the DDA example, I agree with the DDA example, which is excluded in column L, so that's, or in paragraph L, so that is not affected. But what I'd say is without a doubt, there's no perfect legislation, and without a doubt, paragraph L will get us closer to perfect, because as Councilman Vanstrom just mentioned, it is possible for some people to get on here that rig the system and make some money off it, and the city doesn't benefit when that happens. And if we don't include L, then we're actually all saying that's okay. We're saying that we should not do anything to try to prevent those from rigging the system to change something citywide, just as was done with the UDC. And so ultimately what this is doing is this is at least showing here's the goal. The goal is that we're going to put people on there that are going to make decisions that don't profit off of those decisions. Is it 100% perfect? No, it's not. But it's much better than saying, you know what, we're not going to have L, and it's okay to put people that are going to give recommendations and have input and impact on citywide aspects where they're not representing residents, they're representing their shareholders and their developers. So again, I certainly hope that we will get this out, because this has been a real conflict of interest, that we do have the opportunity to show that Roswell's better than that.
Just a comment from me for what little it's worth. I think this is where the American system of government gets in real trouble. I'm probably the only elected official in Roswell who's stupid enough and brazen enough to oppose the pay-for-play measure that got approved 5-0 last year by the council. Overwhelmingly, the only person who was not in favor was yours truly, completely super unpopular in the community. I still opposed to it. This language to me, I'm so confused. I was confused looking at it. I was confused in the committee meeting. I'm confused now in exactly what it is trying to be achieved, because I don't think there's a single person up here who doesn't have, we all share the same belief systems. We do not want people to do the wrong thing based upon the ability to do it with leverage. And so what you're trying to do is to protect your system of government, and protect the efficacy of the things you're doing from having people abuse those things. And people do that from time to time. And there are laws on the books, which I argued last year, which are in place that do appropriately deal with that. And I find this is sometimes where the American system of government finds a reason to get involved in things when there's already laws on the books to adjudicate the issue properly. And so I just say, as a simple mayor and as a resident, I I don't get it. I don't get really what we're trying to achieve here, and I know it, and I was overwhelmingly in the minority last time, and I recognize I'm probably overwhelmingly in the minority again this time. But as a mayor, elected official, and as a resident, I don't like it. So that's my little 2 cents. Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Minority Leader Mayor Wilson. So I will reiterate what I said at the first reading. I'm going to oppose this. I feel confident and proud that I did support this last year. This legislation, I guess we would say, led by Councilmember Palermo, and I do agree that it needed to be vocalized. I believe that most of our residents would agree with the sentiment. Whether they agree with whether it needed to be put into the books or not is up for grabs. But I believe well, I am comfortable with where we are. I believe that there are consequences with every single election. And as we've seen, there have been folks that were on boards and commissions that were appointed and reappointed, or some for first term, that we did not choose to reappoint because they didn't align with the mayor's and this council's vision and mission. And these are good people, but had nothing to do with anything other than we didn't align. And so you see some tide turning. Again, not bad people, but just we have a change of who's sitting on our boards and commissions, and we have some expirations, openings now that we're dealing with to reappoint. So I don't want to cut off my nose to spite my face and miss out on talent here in this city that we can capitalize on. I believe Councilmember Vanstrom touched a bit on this, but we've got a lot of very intelligent and talented people in the city that I would hate to miss out on. And again, we should recuse ourselves or have them recuse themselves. We have no shortage of involved experts and newcomers to the arena of politics here in this city. So I believe that those kind of details will be brought to light in the way of public comment or emails or phone calls to this mayor and council and those going forward. So I'll explain this again at the time of the motion. I will be voting against this, but I'll get to that in a minute, that I'm not supporting this tonight, with all due respect to the opinions here with my colleagues.
Thanks, Lee. Any other thoughts, comments, or questions from council? If not, I'll take it to our Roswell residents. Would any Roswell residents like to weigh in on this matter? Yes, ma'am. Welcome. So glad to see you back. Please share with everybody, the viewing audience and everybody else, your name and where you live. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. I'm Judy Meir. I was a member of the Roswell Historic Preservation Commission for many years. And I can tell you that if we try to eliminate people with, as Lee said, the talent that we need on these boards and commissions, because they may have some connection to what is being reviewed, I think we're really missing out. Because if you're putting people on these boards and commissions that really have no real knowledge, if they just want to get on because they're concerned about what's happening and they want to try to stop things instead of learning how to make our city better, I think we're shooting ourselves in the foot. And over all of those years, there were people on the commission that were business people, contractors of some kind, architects, and when they did have a conflict of interest, they did recuse themselves. And there was any kind of problem, we handled it immediately. So I think that provision would really hurt the city. It's hard enough to get people to say yes to come to those meetings once a month or twice a month, as we did with Preservation Commission. And I think we need all the talent we can get because we have a lot of work to do. And that's how I feel about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Judy. Thank you for your service to our city as well. Would any of the Roswell residents like to speak on this matter? Being that there are other Roswell residents, I bring it back to the council. Yes, ma'am, Sarah.
I have a question for Councilmember Palermo. So in the language that I had initially introduced, which started this whole conundrum, it's very clear on if this was ever challenged ethically or legally, they would immediately go to our disclosures, which we are legally required to publish publicly, Campaign disclosures, for those who don't know, if you receive a campaign contribution, you have to disclose exactly who they are, how much they gave you, their contact, their address. There's a legal record for it. However, how would you propose enforcing your language, which is line item L, which is that we as council people or council members should know or have reason to believe that the person in question could receive a pecuniary benefit? If, say, it was challenged legally, what question are they going to ask us beyond general vibes that we thought that they could possibly make money off of something?
I'm sorry, I was reading the ordinance again. Sorry, Michael, yes, sir.
Thank you, Mayor Wilson. So this is something where, again, I feel it's important to show the principle and show residents the expectation and the expectations they should have in their elected officials. At the end of the day, what's going to be important is the resident is going to question it. They can make some decisions on their own as well, and we have a responsibility just to be able to show and justify that I did not feel they were going to make money off the decisions versus I chose not to support that individual being appointed because they are going to be able to make money off the decisions. Because the challenge is when someone's nominated, it's can be certainly uncomfortable and very understandably uncomfortable to vote against someone. This is really giving the framework that gives the opportunity to vote against someone because they are making a profit off the decisions that are being made. And everything that we've seen from a recusal, because even unfortunately, even just commissions mentioned this evening, there were commissions where individuals would certainly recuse themselves if there was a clear, direct line where it's their client, their customer. But when it's overarching, where it's changing rules, changing laws, things that they personally profit on, we should have people up there that are not making those decisions off of how their business is profiting, and instead what's best for the community of Roswell. And also, frankly, we don't want to have the reputation in Roswell of, to do business in Roswell, you need to hire certain individuals that can assist and have some type of inside information. We need to show that we're just easy to work with, fair, make sure we're working with staff to have better rules. But ultimately, this is the way that residents can hold us accountable, and we can be very focused in who we're supporting and who we're not supporting on the different boards.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, Sarah.
I'll keep it quick. I hear you. Just want to acknowledge your response. We are creating an ordinance which is a legal standard. Your justification for that was, I did not feel as a council member. Feeling is not a legal standard that's enforceable, so therefore I cannot support the inclusion of line item L. Wholeheartedly support line items B and K. That was language that I ran on, went through legal, made sure that it was introduced and added. It was amended to include L. Cannot support L.
Thank you, Sarah. Any other? Yes, sir. Councilmember Palermo.
So I have a follow-up question because I think there are just some differences of opinion, and certainly if you feel there's different language, Councilmember Beeson, that you'd like to do, I'm certainly open to adjusting the language. So what I'd like to talk about is not the exact language in L, but the intent. So the question is, for the intent, should we be appointing members to boards or committees that would profit off of the decisions they would make?
We already have an ordinance that addresses that issue, which means that they have to recuse themselves, same way you and I recused ourselves in the last month on items where we could financially benefit. Our boards and commission members are held to that exact same legal enforceable standard.
So
Councilmember Palermo.
from a legal standard and enforcement standard, which has existed in the city for a long time, it's when it's an individual project that the individual is working on. It's not when it's a decision citywide. So again, the example is, if it's an apartment developer and it's their apartment project, they would have to recuse themselves. They would have recused themselves, or else there would have been consequences. If it's an apartment developer that's not addressing their specific apartment development, but instead they're addressing citywide the rules on apartments, that is something that has not been addressed and is not addressed with the way that our codes and our rules work.
Yes, ma'am, Sarah.
Final response, respectfully, those are items that go through mayor and council for mayor and council approval, not through boards, commissions, and committees. So therefore, to me, that's a non-issue because that's really our responsibility as elected officials. We can hear the recommendations. We can hear, to Ms. Muir's point, their beliefs on best practices according to their experience within the industry. But at the end of the day, we are that fail-safe as the elected officials. I'm done.
Thank you, Sarah. Michael, do you have any additional commentary?
My
Yes,
last
sir.
statement is just, I'm basing it off of what we've seen in the city of Roswell, and unfortunately, what we've seen in the city of Roswell is there are some very savvy developers. There's a reason they make so much money, and they have used their influence and their role to address the direction. Again, just as Councilman Vanster mentioned, of course, there's the situation where someone could game the system and be making some money off it. And L is at least the way for us to show to the community, we're gonna do our best to stop it. It doesn't guarantee it, but at least we're going in the right direction.
Is there any other discussion that anybody on council feels would advance the discussion any further? If not, Councilmember Hills, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor. Before I do, I will say I am not supporting this, but in an effort to keep the yays and nays aligned with the verbiage here, I am going to motion the approval, and then I will deny it. I just want to know. I want you to know why I'm doing that.
You're making the motion.
I'm making the motion, but I am not going to support it. So this is a motion to approve a text amendment to amend Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2.5, Code of Ethics, Section 2.5.3, Prohibitions of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell regarding appointments and nominations to boards and commissions. Second reading.
Thank you, Councilmember Hills. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
There's a second by Councilmember Palermo. All those in favor?
Mayor, I'd like to make a move to amend the existing motion by striking line item L.
A suggestion was made by Councilmember Beeson to amend the motion by striking line item L. That's a motion? Is there a second for that? Seconded by Councilmember Vanstrom. Yes, sir, Councilmember Palermo?
Excellent. So with that, what I'd like to do, and I certainly hope there'll be support from this council, is my intent is absolutely that we're going to pass this tonight. I mean, I'm always supportive of going back to committee and discussing if there's a way to reach a compromise. So obviously, if that was the way this council wanted to go, I'd be glad to do that to make sure we get the right language. But assuming this council feels we've discussed this plenty, what I intend to do is I'm going to vote against that amendment because I think it is crucial that we move this together complete, which is with B, with K, and with L. So I'll be voting against that amendment, and hopefully, if a majority votes against that amendment, then I will be making a motion after that to move forward this complete as written.
All right, so I have two motions on the floor. The second motion I need to deal with first, which is the approval of text amendment to amend Chapter 2, Administrative Article 2.5, Code of Ethics, Section 2.53, Prohibitions of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Roswell regarding appointments and nominations to boards and commissions. Second reading with the deletion of paragraph L. That is the motion, the amended motion on the floor. It was made by Councilmember Beeson. It was seconded by Councilmember Vanstrom. All in favor of that amended motion, please raise your hands. All opposed? The motion fails. Let me go to the original motion. The original motion is the approval of text amendment to amend Chapter 2, Administration, Article 2.5, Code of Ethics, Section 2.53, Prohibitions of the Code of Ordinance of the City of Roswell regarding appointments and nominations to boards and commissions. Second reading, as stated here in your literature. That motion was made by Councilmember Hills and seconded by Councilmember Palermo. All those in favor of that motion, please raise your hand. There's 3 votes. All those opposed? Outstanding. So we have, in my little short tenure, a 3-3. And I can tell you, you know what I think about council unable to align and come to agreement. It's really easy for me, this one. I believe it's an abstention. Is that correct? Yeah, that would be a big fat abstention from the mayor. So there's abstention. So it's 3-3 with an abstention. The measure fails. Thank you. Okay. All right, next is the Community Development Department. Councilman Palermo, would you please read the item?
Item number 3, approval of a final plat, Etris Grove, land lot 1236, located at 12155 Etris Road. Ms. Bromberg?
Welcome, Lenore.
Good evening. Jackie's passing out a hard copy of the presentation slides that will hopefully come up on our screen. There we go. Good evening. This is the consideration of the approval of final plat is the Etris Grove subdivision, which is located at 12155 Etris Road. This project was approved for rezoning in August of 2021, and there were 7 conditions associated with that approval. In March of 2022, the preliminary plat was approved, and then in August of 2022, the land disturbance permit was issued. The land disturbance permit did consider a variety of the conditions prior to it being issued, including making sure that the preliminary plat and the site plan included in the land disturbance permit were in substantial conformance with the site plan that was approved by Mayor and Council at the time of the rezoning in 2021. There were 7 conditions, as I noted. Number 1 is that the plat must be in substantial accordance with the approved site plan that was dated as a part of the original rezoning. 6-foot sidewalk along the property frontage is number 2. There's a requirement for an 8-foot privacy fence. There was a requirement for a couple of items to be reviewed with the neighbors, including tree species, as well as to do some coordination regarding the stormwater plan. Both of those were completed prior to the land disturbance permit being issued, and the records of those consultations were included in our records. Number 6, a mandatory HOA, which has the responsibility for maintaining the detention pond and the perimeter fence, is just a couple of items. We do have the HOA documents that have been created and have confirmed that those are included. And then last is that homes will be built under current Energy Start certification standards. We have yet to receive a building permit because they cannot apply for one and get one until the plat is approved and recorded. So that one is still pending, but it would be a review component of the building permits as each of those houses come in. There are 3 pages to the plat. This is the cover page with a variety of notes and signature blocks. We also have the conditions that are referred to for the rezoning are scanned in on the 2nd page, along with a couple of tables regarding some parcel data. And then last but not least is the 3rd page, which includes the 27 single-family lots. The lots do range in size. This is RS12. The lots range from just over 12,000 square feet to almost 20,000 square feet. The smaller ones happen to be in the middle of the development. I am happy to answer any questions you may have about the final plat.
Thanks, Lenore. Does council have any comments or questions for Lenore? Being that there are none, do any Roswell residents have any comments or questions on this matter? Being that there are none, I bring it back to council for any additional thoughts, comments, or questions. Being that there's none, I would like to ask Councilmember Palermo, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor Wilson. Based on the expectation that all conditions and requirements have all been met, I motion to approve item number 3, the final plat, Etris Grove, land lot 1236, located at 12155 Etris Road.
Thank you, Councilmember Palermo. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Vanstrom. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Motion passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Lenore. All right, next is Transportation Department. Councilmember Hills, would you read the next item, please?
Yes, sir, Mayor Wilson. Consideration approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to authorize execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Georgia Department of Transportation, also known as GDOT, for the T-Splost 1 Big Creek Parkway project. Director Littlefield.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Sorry, Jeff, we stuck you at the end.
What's that?
Sorry, we stuck you at the end.
No, that's fine. That's fine. It's been fun. I probably pushed it too many times now. Yeah, they're over here. Okay. There we go. All right, we're here to discuss the intergovernmental agreement between the City of Roswell and Georgia Department of Transportation. The IGA covers the section in blue, which is right there. It says bridge portion only. That's what this IGA covers. There are a few requirements in the IGA. First of all, the City of Roswell is responsible for all local, state, and Army Corps of Engineering permits, and to provide to GDOT the permits no later than 120 days after October 1st of 2024. The developer of the 400 Express Lane project is responsible for the design, engineering, and preparation of all plans and the construction over the bridge over 400. The final amount of payment and the payment terms will be determined between the City of Roswell and GDOT by September 30th of 2024. The City of Roswell will enter into a contract to construct the approaches to the Big Creek Parkway within 1 year of the final acceptance of the State Road 400 project. That's the primary requirements of the IGA between the City of Roswell and the Georgia Department of Transportation. It is solely for the blue section, which is the bridge. The city would be responsible for tying into the approaches at the end.
Yeah, this is a gigantic matter. It seems like it comes across as a simple matter. This is a big matter, and I'd like to acknowledge, Jeff, your leadership since coming on board has been incredibly instrumental and helpful, particularly with the Georgia Department of Transportation and how you have moved things in a very positive way and made some really critical things happen for the City of Roswell. I'd also like to especially give a shout out, to use that term, to Councilmember Palermo, who's had some real great insight in terms of these negotiations, to Councilmember Hills, who's been involved with this since day one, Councilmember Vanstrom, Councilmember Mortland, Councilmember Beeson, Councilmember Hall. Every one of these council members has been integrally involved in this, and this goes back to the original kind of big picture strategy of this council, and kind of a big broad stroke understanding and reinventing how things can be in this city. This just seems like, hey, we're just approving an IGA for $14.2 million over 400 connecting the east and west side of Roswell, i.e. Big Creek Parkway. But it really has much greater consequences than that. This is a big deal. And the fact that you were successful in getting very adaptive and positive language in this contract compared to a year ago is dramatic. I mean, absolutely dramatic what you have achieved. And Mike, I got to give you a lot of credit. You've been very instrumental in that. So hats off to Dave, to you, to everybody. Mike, well done. I know Peter's been involved. Lee, you've been at the head of this. But Christine and Lee and Sarah and Will have all been involved in this integrally. So this is a big deal. I'll say my one little big comment for the end, and I'll let the other council members address this. Councilmember Hills.
Yes. Director Littlefield, for our residents or anybody that's first time tuning in on this, would you give just a little insight, doesn't have to be great big, on why we're going into this IGA with GDOT and why we're not building the bridge? Would you just give some insight on how that's working, timeline, big
This
picture?
is actually a T-SPLOS-1 project. It's been around for a while. The problem was it couldn't be built with the current alignment of 400. The center line with the new project, the express lanes, is actually moving, and that's where the bridge piers go for the center of the bridge. So in order for us to actually build this, we need the GDOT project to move forward. And if we don't do it now, it could be very difficult to get access to the corridor once it is an actual express lanes that's collecting tolls, because we would actually have to pay compensation event is what they would call it, and you'd have to make up the money that you had in lane closures, so with tolls. So if they would forecast you would cost so much money well, we would collect so much money in toll revenue, you would pay that money in addition to building the bridge. So it's very important that we access this during the 400 project before it actually becomes a tolled facility and is run by a developer for 50 years.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Council, any other thoughts, comments, or questions? Anybody else want to speak to the big, broad picture that you guys have committed to as a consequence of this IGA? I mean, it's pretty big, but you guys, what's behind this is gigantic. I mean, I guess I'll have to brag on you if you're not going to brag on yourselves. I'll come back and I guess save it for the end. Any Roswell residents would like to address this IGA? If not, we'll bring it back to council. Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Hills.
I feel like I should say this, so I will. And I did use the term feel, and that's not being derogatory, but I do feel compelled to say that this complete mayor and council is not simply checking boxes on this. We're being very deliberate about what we're doing with this east-west connector. It's very important to our residents. I think it'll become more important the closer we get. So this is not a checking boxes. This is a being deliberate, this mayor and council, with our intentions of how we serve our residents and those visitors that come through. And I'm so excited about this. This is also another piece that I feel is team building with the Georgia Department of Transportation and the city of Roswell's transportation. And that's a big deal that we continue to do that. Not that we're getting milked or that we're getting taken advantage of, but we're building a relationship so that each of our projects coming forward become easier to manage, and we have a regular dialogue with Commissioner McMurray and all those professionals at GDOT. But our guard is still up for those of you listening, and I'm sure there'll be plenty of dialogue on the social internet later, but I don't really care. I feel compelled to say that it's important to this mayor and council that we have a relationship with GDOT, and this is one more step in that direction that we're working on stabilizing and just nourishing that relationship with GDOT and getting the business of our residents and our city done. So it's not just checking boxes.
Michael, yes, sir. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. This is definitely very exciting, very important. Because as even came up at the committee meeting, it makes sense that a lot of residents would take it for granted that, hey, it was voted on in T-Splosh 1, so therefore, just smooth sailing ahead. And unfortunately, that's just not how it works when you're dealing with GDOT and you're just dealing with so many different agencies, et cetera, and such big dollar amounts. So this one is not an easy project. It was certainly not an easy negotiation. GDOT's original proposals and IGA definitely was a lot worse for the city. And so really glad with the great partnership of GDOT seeing just the unity that this mayor and this council had and them really working with us and partnering with us. I mean, at the end of the day, GDOT is a very powerful organization. The head of GDOT is ranked as one of the most influential Georgians, which is obviously understandable. And yet through a lot of work, a lot of meetings, we're able to work through this to show that we are absolutely committed to this bridge being built, which is absolutely an important priority. And I'm glad that this council's doing that because, again, it's easy to take it for granted, but also with that logic, you'd think in 2021, you'd think Oxbow was being worked on the entire time, which, obviously it's not always what you expect, but this mayor and council is working hard to come to an agreement with GDOT to make sure this bridge is gonna be built prior to them opening up their express lanes.
Anybody want to address Big Creek Parkway? You just want to leave it alone tonight? Save it for another big announcement. Okay, we will. All right, that being said, any other thoughts, comments, or questions from council? Outstanding. Councilmember Hills, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, Mayor Wilson. Motion to approve, or motion approval for the mayor and/or city administrator to authorize execution of an intergovernmental agreement with the Georgia Department of Transportation, GDOT, for the T-Splosh 1 Big Creek Parkway project.
Thank you, Councilmember Hills. Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Palermo. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hands. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Congratulations, Jeff. Thank you. City Attorney Davidson, would you please read your item on your report?
Thank you, Mayor. The only item I have is recommendation for closure to discuss personnel, litigation, and real estate.
Thank you, David. Do I have a motion for closure?
Motion to approve.
Motion by Lee Hills. Do I have a second? Seconded by Councilmember Morthland. All in favor of going to closure, please raise your hands. We go to closure unanimously. Thank you. Being that there are no other items, this mayor and council meeting of June 12, 2023 is adjourned. Thank you very much.